we've got a piece of oak here. It's about 6 1/4 by 6 1/4. We're going to find the center on both sides of this. We're going to load this up between centers to start. And once we get it mounted up here, the first thing you're going to see me do is take out some of the wobble in the face. Then I'm going to get to work on creating the tenon so we can get this mounted into the 4-jaw chuck. It's going to be a lot easier once we get this mounted in the 4-jaw chuck to do what we need to do. So we make that transition pretty quick. And then once we get it flipped around, I'm going to start working on the other side. Same process as before. Initially just going to try to true up the face, get that nice and flat. And now we're going to start making our first reference marks. So the first mark that I made on this was to determine where I wanted the feet to be. Now this is a square piece, so the feet are going to be equidistant from each other. So just holding my pen steady on the tool rest, spinning it around so I can designate where I want to start that cut, where the edges of my feet are going to be. Then we're going to go inside, and I'm going to mark where I want roughly where I want the bowl to be. Move the second mark inside of that mark a little bit because I decided I wanted it a little bit skinnier, a little bit more room to work. So what I'm going to point at here in a moment, the 4 feet, obviously between that line and that line is where I'm going to create a bead of sorts. That's where I'm going to be curling the inside around to give the designation between the feet and the bottom of the bowl. So we'll go ahead and get this turned back on a time lapse and get to watching a little bit more lathe cutting. So at this stage you'll see that I'm just removing material, getting the bulk of the material taken out, so that way I can see it start to take shape in my head and realize what I want to do on the next steps. Once we get a sufficient amount of material removed, we'll start shaping up the bowl. And now that I have the bowl shaped to roughly the way I'd like it, I'm going to go ahead and start creating a foot for when I turn this around. So I've got my caliper set to the same size as my 4-jaw chuck. So just burnishing a little bit on the bowl there. Grab my carbide tip blade. I go in. I didn't create very much of a foot here at all. Enough to grab a hold of. I wish I would have made it a little bit deeper because I do struggle with this a couple points later in the video, but this gets the job done. So now I'm going to go ahead and just clean up some tool marks, get this thing ready and do some sanding. You will notice I had to break out the power sander in a couple spots because of the feet with the large gaps between them. I tried to sand it by hand and got my finger smacked pretty good in the process, so decided that a power tool and power sanding was the way to go here. And now that we have it all sanded up, it's time for some finish. I opted for just an oil rub on this one. Didn't go back and apply any wax because of the same issue I was having with the sanding. I figured if I tried to rub some beeswax in there, it was just gonna hurt me and make a mess, so I didn't want to do that. So we just did a mineral oil rub, which this oak really takes oil really good. I think oak looks gorgeous with a nice oil rub anyway, so I'll let you watch this process. Everybody enjoys watching the oil rub, the transformation. Now that we have the underside finished, it's time to flip it around. This is the moment of truth when hoping that I made that foot big enough that I actually have something to grab a hold of, which it does. Once again, I do struggle with that a little bit here. Once I start cutting on this side, it comes out of the chuck a couple of times, but once again, it gets the job done, it works. So we're going to flip it around, get it secured, and now we're going to make a depth hole to determine how deep this is. This is a very shallow bowl, so I thought it was very important to make this depth hole so I don't overshoot and make a funnel instead of a bowl. So once we determine the depth, we'll turn the time lapse back on and watch some more turning. And it was at this point that I decided I wanted a very smooth transition from the top here, the rim, into the bowl. I didn't want a clear cut start and finish, you know, here's the rim, here's the bowl. This one I thought it'd be kind of cool just to have a very smooth transition in, and that's where I ultimately came up with the name for this bowl, general relativity, because it looks like time-space is warping around an object. And this is the stage where I start having troubles with that foot. As you can tell, you see the piece disappearing off the chuck multiple times during this process. I'm trying to make an angled cut back on, I mean, it is going between the face and the sides, and there's those big gaps, so plenty of opportunities for it to snag. Not ideal anyway, but let alone with a very small foot there, it made it very difficult. Finally, I gave in and said, to heck with it, I'll use my sander to make these edges, and it turned out pretty nice. So after a light sanding on the lathe, everybody's favorite, once again, time to apply the oil. I really do love the way oak takes to mineral oil. It really brings out the beauty in that wood. And here we have the finished product. Now off screen I did do a little bit more sanding with my orbital sander, but I'm really happy with the way this turned out. I really like the name. I think it's fitting, and here's a couple pictures for you. Really hope you enjoyed this video. I had a great time making this project, and if you've made it this far, please like and subscribe, because I will be having more content coming soon with bigger projects. Thank you very much.